the picture I took from my cell phone. And it's gorgeous, you know. So let's come back to the AI. The sentence. Actions speak louder than words, right? All that glitters is not gold. Everyone is saying right. Bite the bullet and dust. What else? It could be, yeah, bite the hands that feed that. So dust, bullet, curb, pizza, it could be anything. That, you know, tells us about a challenge with the AI, which we call determinism challenge, when there could be multiple answers, and whenever you query something, the answer could be different. And it depends a lot on the context you are providing. So with the AI, whenever you are working with the code, imagine, you know, this is just in the context of, you know, proverbs, you could answer it, but still there are multiple options. But imagine if you are writing code among the thousands of lines and you find some wrong answer, which is syntactically correct. Every one of these words are syntactically correct, but in terms of semantics, they are all different. So the AI does not understand the semantics. It understands the syntax mostly until we give it some context. So this is the first problem, which is we call determinism challenge. And last question, why is the Golden Gate Bridge white? Tell me, why is it? It's not white, right? Yeah, so all are very honest, you know, you're all not knowledgeable. So we know that Golden Gate Bridge is not white, and we are here to say that. But when you ask AI something like that, and if it doesn't know, then it tries to, you know, make up something. It tries to be nice and tells you. And exactly as you mentioned, the hallucination problem. So I asked ChatGPT, what makes the Grove Mall in Islamabad, we have an office in Pakistan, such a good place for shopping? And it gave me the whole big answer, you know. It's good for variety of stores and entertainment options and blah, blah. And, you know, Amir lives in Islamabad. He knows there is no Grove Mall in Islamabad. So hallucinations is, again, a challenge when you are dealing with the AI. And again, especially, you know, if you are working with some code library which doesn't exist. So there is a research, for example, at Stanford, when people found that AI assistant wrote significantly less secure code. And another research, like, you know, when it were given Stack Overflow questions, that 52% of the answer was incorrect. 48% of the cases had logic which was not correct. So I mean semantically not correct, because the syntax is always right, you know. And the last line, ChatGPT simply fabricated libraries that don't exist. So we have problems, same, two problems, determinism and here hallucinations. So if I ask now, how reliable is the AI generated code? So let me make it easier for you, give three choices. A, 100% reliable, raise your hands. B, oops, sorry, at your own risk. C, not at all. Okay, so B is the winner. Most of the people said B, and that's what, you know, most of the AI providers say this, that use at your own risk. You should be carefully test and review all the code for errors and bugs and vulnerabilities. So use it at your own risk. So we are at an API meetup. Why does it even matter for APIs? Why we are talking about the code generation? Because code generation is relevant to something we call API adoption. So if I ask, I'm sure you all are familiar with these logos. What is the common bit among all these four companies? Okay. What else? API first, right? Okay, but there's one more. Said you want to say? Yeah, great developer experience documentation might be subjective. I can say my documentation is the best. I provide the best developer experience, but who am I to decide? So all four, they are the among first API, first unicorns of the world. So Postman is also a unicorn, but like it's a solution provider, not the API first company. So these four, and I've been following, their documentation, their developer experience, and their API adoption. So they are highly adopted APIs who have hit the barrier of over $1 billion valuation. And if you look at the documentation, we find some common bits. You can see all the language references in their docs. In Twilio, you can find all the language references over there. Similarly, in Contentful, all the platforms, and the Stripe, you can see client libraries over there. So in summary, common factors among highly adopted APIs are two. Number one, they speak the language of developers. And number two, they provide pre-built code as SDKs. I have not seen a very highly adopted API without providing these pre-built code called SDKs. So now let's put on shoes of a developer and go through an API consumption journey. So at an abstract level, there are three main phases of consuming an API. Number one is learning the API concepts. So how do we learn about an API? From API documentation, right? And sometimes we have some old school PDF, sometimes we have forums, and a few developers, they raise a support ticket, tell me, how does this work and how that works, okay? So we learn the API concepts through API documentation and other places mostly. Second phase is when a developer write API access code. So this does not mean the business logic or use case, but how can you access the API? For example, like when you see API reference, you configure the variables, you figure out how authentication works, you serialize the body, send the HTTP request, deserialize the response, and handle the errors. So none of these steps relate to your use case. They are common across API calls or like the use case you are trying to make with the API. So we call them API access code. And what are the ways to provide this? Like how companies provide these the code to these steps is in the form of SDKs, or a lot of companies let people write manual code to access API. The last phase is writing the use case code. So some companies give some sample applications, and some give code snippets. You can just write some snippets and just add your own content. And some companies give guided walkthroughs and scenarios. So why I showed you all of this. So it's time to see these API consumption steps in action. First, I will show them using a traditional way, and then I will bring the AI and try to repeat these steps using generative AI. The first one, I recorded a demo before coming here. I was not sure about the internet, so let me hit the play button. So over here you can see the first step is about learning the API concepts. You can see how the access tokens are defined, and if I want to know about authorization and the scopes of authentication, I can learn the API by looking at the documentation. Step one done. Step two is writing the access code of the API, and I have SDKs, SDK in PHP, in Java, in Python, in Ruby, multiple languages. I simply download the SDK, install it, and start using the API. The third bit is the use case code. So here you can see, as a Spotify user, I want to create a playlist. So there are 4 steps to it. Number one, I want to get the current user profile. And how am I doing it? I am going to add my authentication information to it. So I have already added my client ID and client secret. Just going to add authentication scopes. So the first one is user read email, and then, yeah. So scopes are done. Now I'm going to fetch the authentication token. Okay, I got the authorization token. This will expire in 59 minutes. Now I will try this out. So you can see success and my name is there. So correctly, we have fetched the token, the user profile. Next step to create a playlist on Spotify. So again, it requires different kind of authorization tokens. So I'm going to change them. So there's a lot of learning involved and manual steps involved, even with the help of these guided walkthroughs. So now the new token is there, and now I'm going to create the playlist with my ID and some dummy name. Playlist for the API meetup, and the album was created for the API meetup in San Francisco. All right, time to hit the try it out button, and it's all success. I have now created a playlist at Spotify. So I can go next. I have completed all the steps, use cases done. And to verify if that playlist is created or not, let me take you to my Spotify profile. There you go. So this is one of the playlists. And if I hit the refresh button, you can see playlist for the API meetup, and you can see the album was created for the API meetup in San Francisco. So we have seen all three steps without any generative AI, right? All are with me. The first step was learning about the API concept. Second was writing the access code. Third was writing the use case code. The access code I haven't shown you yet. So first, let's see the second step in action. Yep. Now, I'm going to repeat the steps with the help of API Copilot. The first step was learning the API concept. So I can ask this Copilot about any question I might have for the API. For example, which endpoints only work for users who have Spotify Premium? So I can ask it, or I can raise a support ticket, I can read PDFs. So if I ask this API Copilot, it tells me all the endpoints which only work with Spotify Premium. And I can ask about all the different questions, like what are those authorization scopes and other things. Secondly, about the code, how to create a new playlist, which I just showed you, and add the 10 most popular Taylor Swift songs. So now I'm talking about using multiple endpoints and dealing with all the authorization and everything. And when I asked it, it just gave me the complete sample application. You can see, just need to change the ID, add your, authentication steps, and these are the explanation how it's being fetched. So SDKs are at the back, which are being referenced here, right? So all the application code is generated automatically, and I will tell you, why it's hallucination free. So let's try one more. I am searching for a track titled Mockingbird by the artist Eminem. So that's a code. Again, it's generating on the runtime, and it will explain at the end what are the steps it has taken. You can just follow this step if you want, or simply copy the code, paste in your favorite IDE, and just run it. It will work. So I just showed you quickly 3 of these use cases, and you have again the magical SDK on top, and you can just change the language, generate SDKs, and you have built a complete application without writing a single line of code, right? You have consumed it. So moving forward, you might have noticed I used AI for the step number 1, learning the API concept, then step number 3, which is writing the use case code. The API access code, I did not use AI. Can you guess why? Because AI is great, but should we use it everywhere, in every case, or not? So that's a question I want all of you to think. Let me show you one thing. So, when we talk about API concepts, for example, this is a fintech API, I might have a query about the payment system or the billing information or how the orders work, right? It can be different question for different developers, right? But if I want to talk about dealing with authentication schemes or how to serialize the request, how to deal with the error codes, that information is not dynamic. That will be static across all the developers, right? Similarly, when I am writing the use case code, the application logic, again, this is dynamic. This is different for different developers. You could be writing one use case, you could be writing another use case. So the step one, API concepts, again, is dynamic. Everyone can have a different concept. They want to learn, they can query different things, and use case code can be different. But the middle layer, API access code, is, is deterministic. It's always the same for all developers. That's why we have SDK generators who can write deterministically complete code to call the API. So what it becomes, the application logic requests and API access code, SDK take care of the request. A developer don't even have to learn how OAuth 2.0 three-legged works. No, because it's being tackled in SDK. Similarly, response comes back as API integration logic. So in summary, the step one about learning the API concept is dynamic. Writing API access code is static. And again, writing use case code is dynamic. We should or we can use AI because of its dynamic nature to do steps 1 and 3. And for writing API access code, there is a better way to do it. Because AI is a machine. Automatic code generator like API-matic is also a machine. One generates deterministically 100% the same code all the time. And one generates by by thinking, by deciphering what you want to say with it. Okay. Now, what about the hallucinations problem now? All the things you mentioned in the beginning. I told you the problems in research. So, the problem is that when you ask AI, which has so many different options, there could be a problem of determinism. Or if there is no option available, there could be a problem of hallucinations. What if you limit the source of understanding for the AI? What if you force it to say no if it doesn't know the answer, if it doesn't find a required endpoint, a required information in the vectors in the database of the RAG model? If you are able to force that, then you can control the hallucinations problem and you can train the AI on deterministically generated code. So that's why that happened in the back. So the API Copilot has just showed you used for the step 1 and step 3, and the API-matic code generator is basically used to train, both for the both use cases for the both areas to train the API Copilot. So that was a very quick and short introduction, and if you want to try the API Copilot, it's still in beta. So please, there is your QR code. Try it out and give us feedback because we are trying to, just like generate code for you developers. Thank you.